June 9, 1944. Just 3 days after D-Day. A thin mist clings to the hedgerows of Normandy as dawn breaks over a battered French village called Normandy. The air smells of diesel and wet soil. In a muddy field east of the town, a group of German tankers from the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend share a cigarette behind their Panzerkampfwagen 5, the feared Panther. Their leader, Lieutenant Karl Weber, laughs as he watches a column of Allied Shermans crawl into view through the haze. "Langsam enten," he mutters, "slow ducks." The Panther's long-barreled 75mm KK-42 gun could slice through a Sherman's armor from nearly 2 kilometers away. To the Germans, the Sherman was a joke, undergunned, thin-skinned, and prone to catching fire. They even had a nickname for it: Tommy Cooker. Inside one of those cookers, Corporal Thomas Harding grips the steel handles of his M4 Sherman, sweat trickling down his neck. His tank commander, Lieutenant Alan Reeves, peers through the periscope. "Bloody hell, Carl. They've got the high ground again," Reeves mutters. The Shermans were reliable, but against Panthers and Tigers, reliability meant little. The men knew it. A Sherman's 75mm gun often couldn't penetrate a Panther's frontal armor, even at point-blank range. Then came the flash. A blinding streak of light cut across the field. The first Sherman exploded in a burst of flame, turret thrown aside like a child's toy. Weber's gunner reloaded. Another flash, another Allied tank gone. Within minutes, the field was littered with burning hulks. The German crews laughed again, convinced nothing could challenge their armored superiority. But in the Allied camps behind the lines, engineers were working quietly on something that would change everything. January 1944. At the Larkhill Gunnery Range in Wiltshire, a cold wind cuts across the English countryside. Amid the clatter of tools and the smell of hot metal, British engineer Lieutenant Colonel George Witheridge watches a Sherman tank being gutted like a fish. He had fought in North Africa, had seen what German Tigers could do to British armor. Now, his mission was simple: make the Sherman deadly. The British had something powerful: the Ordnance QF 17-pounder, a 76.2mm anti-tank gun capable of piercing nearly 150mm of armor at 1,000 meters. But it was too large to fit into a standard Sherman turret. For months, teams struggled to make it work. "Cut away the radio mount," Witheridge ordered. "We'll move it to the rear. Use the loader's space." It was a brutal modification. They had to turn the gun sideways, add a new muzzle brake to control recoil, and stretch the breech backward into the turret bustle. But slowly, the design came together. By spring, the first prototype rolled out of the workshops. The Sherman Firefly, an American body with a British heart. Its slender, lethal barrel extended far beyond the hull, giving it a silhouette unlike any Sherman before. When the crews first saw it, they were skeptical. Too long, too awkward. "She'll be spotted a mile away," grumbled Sergeant Mac McLaren, one of the test gunners. But that changed after the first live-fire trial. At 1,200 yards, the Firefly's 17-pounder punched straight through the front plate of a captured Panther, something no Allied tank gun had ever done. The test range fell silent, save for the hiss of smoke rising from the wrecked German machine. Witheridge turned to the men and said quietly, "Gentlemen, this will even the odds." In the following weeks, British workshops across southern England began converting standard Shermans, about 1 in every 4, into Fireflies. They would soon be shipped across the Channel, just in time for the battles of Normandy. And on the other side of the front, the same Panther crews who mocked the Sherman had no idea what awaited them. July 8, 1944. Outside the village of Saint-Aignan-de-Crémenil, south of Caen. The humid air hums with flies and the distant thunder of artillery. Fields of wheat sway in the morning wind, hiding the silhouettes of advancing British tanks from the Sherwood Rangers' yeomanry. Among them, the newly issued Sherman Fireflies take their positions, their long barrels jutting out like spears between the hedgerows. Inside one of those Fireflies sits Lieutenant Joe Eakins, 21 years old, serving as gunner. Sweat runs into his eyes as he adjusts the sight. His commander, Sergeant Gordon, speaks calmly over the intercom. Panther at 11 o'clock, 800 yards. He hasn't seen us. Steady now. Across the field, SS Hauptsturmführer Mikkel Wittmann, Germany's top tank ace with 138 confirmed kills, leads his Tigers of the Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 101. Confident, he drives straight into the village, believing the British line shattered. To Wittmann, the Shermans were little more than target practice. But this time, one of them wasn't ordinary. Eakins exhales, aligning the crosshairs on the first Tiger. On target, he says softly. Fire. The Firefly recoils violently. A flash, a streak, the armor-piercing shell slams into the Tiger's side. A split second later, detonation. The Tiger erupts in fire, its turret blown clean off. Eakins reloads, fires again. Another Tiger ignites, then a third. In less than 12 minutes, Wittmann's feared column is reduced to burning wrecks scattered across the French countryside. For the first time, the mighty Tigers had been outgunned and outsmarted. Word spread fast. British tankers cheered, commanders took note, and German radio intercepts began reporting long-barreled Shermans capable of killing heavy armor at shocking ranges. Wehrmacht intelligence gave them a name. Feuerfliege, Firefly. That day, the myth of German invincibility began to crack. The hunters had become the hunted. August 1944. The fields of Normandy burn beneath the summer sun. The once unstoppable Panzer divisions are now retreating toward the Falaise pocket, harassed day and night by Allied airstrikes and those dreaded new Shermans with the long guns. At a makeshift command post near Troon, Oberstleutnant Karl Weber, the same officer who once laughed at the Tommy Cookers, leans over a map littered with red pins. His radio crackles with reports. Enemy tanks, long barrels. They hit us from beyond effective range, requesting artillery support. Weber exhales, lighting another cigarette with trembling hands. The Firefly's reach was terrifying. It could knock out a Panther before the Germans could even return fire. Commanders began issuing new orders. Engage from ambush only, avoid open ground. Never underestimate a Sherman. The old arrogance was gone. Frontline crews started painting camouflage stripes across their turrets, trying to mask the distinctive long-barrel silhouette. In desperation, German spotters mistook ordinary Shermans for Fireflies and ordered premature retreats. Panic became part of the battlefield. Captured reports later revealed just how deeply the fear had set in. A Panther commander wrote in his log, "The new Shermans can kill us at impossible distance. We cannot expose our front armor. Even hulled down, we are vulnerable. Their fire comes like a lightning." Meanwhile, inside the Fireflies, the British crews were learning to play the psychological game. They knew the Germans feared their gun. So they often placed Fireflies slightly behind regular Shermans, using the shorter tanks as bait. When the German tanks fired and revealed their positions, the Firefly would strike, precise, merciless, invisible, until the moment of impact. Lieutenant Alan Reeves, the same man who once cursed the weak 75mm gun, now whispered through his headset before each engagement. Wait for them to laugh first, then make them stop. By September, entire German platoons were withdrawing from firefights after spotting a single Firefly barrel gleaming between the hedgerows. The battlefield balance had shifted. The once mocked Sherman had become the most feared sight on the Western Front. But in the months ahead, the Firefly would face its greatest test. As the Allies crossed into the heart of occupied Europe, where every village street became a trap, and every field a graveyard of steel. September 1944, Operation Market Garden, the Netherlands. The autumn air is heavy with drizzle, turning roads into rivers of mud. Allied armored columns grind north toward Arnhem, their engines roaring under gray skies. Among them, Sherman Fireflies rumble through villages still scarred by retreating German forces. Inside one Firefly, Corporal Thomas Harding adjusts the elevation wheel, the same man who had once sweated in fear under German guns at Normandy and Besson. Now, his confidence is different, sharper, steadier. The voice of Lieutenant Reeves cuts through the intercom. Hold your fire. Wait until you see the cross through the periscope. A panther appears at the far end of a Dutch dike road, its gun turning, unaware. Rain pelts the Firefly's armor, drumming like fingers on a coffin lid. Harding exhales. The rangefinder clicks. Target acquired. Firing, the 17-pounder roars. The shot pierces the air like thunder. At 1,100 yards, the shell strikes the Panther's turret ring. A perfect hit. Flames burst through the hatch. The crew barely escapes. Reeves watches through binoculars, muttering under his breath. They're not laughing now. From Nijmegen to the Rhine, the Firefly's presence becomes a psychological weapon. British and Canadian units rely on them to spearhead assaults through armored choke points. German reports describe engagements where entire Panther platoons withdrew without firing, convinced they faced multiple Fireflies. In truth, there were often just one or two. The tank's reputation even reached the propaganda offices in Berlin. A Wehrmacht bulletin from October 1944 grimly noted, "Enemy armored forces possess a variant of the Sherman tank equipped with a high-velocity cannon capable of destroying our Panthers and Tigers at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. Countermeasures are under development." But there were no real countermeasures left. The Reich's factories were in ruins, fuel supplies collapsing, and experienced tank crews dying faster than they could be replaced. The German war machine was cracking, and every Firefly round driven through a Tiger's armor was another fracture in that steel facade. As the Allies pushed eastward, even American units began requesting the British conversions. Many U.S. tankers, tired of watching their 75mm shells bounce off German armor, painted 17 PDR please on the sides of their Shermans. The Firefly had proven itself not as a perfect tank, but as a symbol of ingenuity and survival. It was the underdog that learned to bite back. Yet for the men inside, victory was never certain. The war dragged on, into the forests of Germany and across rivers lined with fire. And every time a Firefly's breech slammed shut, its crew knew the next round could be their last. March 1945. The Rhine River, near Wesel. Morning fog rolls over the shattered bridges and burned-out villages that mark the German frontier. The thunder of artillery echoes in the distance as Allied forces prepare their final push into the heart of the Reich. A single Sherman Firefly from the 11th Armored Division idles in a ditch beside the road, its long barrel wrapped in burlap and mud to hide the gleam of steel. Inside the cramped turret, Lieutenant Joe Ekins wipes condensation from his gun sight. He's older now, hardened, quieter. Across the river, smoke rises from burning farmhouses. Somewhere out there, the last German tanks are waiting. Through the mist, a shape emerges. Another Panther, its hull blackened, its crew desperate. The once proud machine crawls through the mud like a wounded animal. Ekins steadies the sight. He doesn't speak this time. The breech slams shut. The shot rips through the silence. One flash, one impact. The Panther jerks to a stop, smoke pouring from its rear deck. For a moment, there's nothing but the hiss of rain and the hum of the Firefly's engine. It's over. Within weeks, the German armored divisions that once ruled Europe are gone, destroyed in the fields of France, the forests of the Ardennes, and now the plains of Western Germany. The men who laughed at the Tommy Cooker are either dead, captured, or retreating eastward into chaos. In their wake stands a machine that was never meant to be legendary, a battlefield improvisation born of desperation and brilliance. The Sherman Firefly. By war's end, over 2,000 Fireflies had served across Europe. They accounted for some of the most decisive tank kills of the campaign, Panthers, Tigers, and even King Tigers, often from distances the Germans once thought impossible. Allied crews learned to trust its gun, even if they never fully trusted their luck. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, many Fireflies were left behind, scrapped, abandoned, or sold for parts. Yet among the men who fought inside them, a legend lingered. How a tank once mocked as a joke became the hammer that broke the pride of the Panzerwaffe. A generation later, historian Kenneth Maxey would write, "The Firefly was not the strongest tank of the war, nor the fastest, nor the most armored. But it was the right weapon, in the right hands, at the right time. And perhaps that's the truest measure of victory. Not in the might of the machine, but in the resolve of the men who refused to stop fighting until they built something that could." The laughter had long since died out. All that remained was the echo of steel and the memory of the Firefly's sting.